Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It's a Friday night, the last day of the month of August, which means the three warmest months, June, July, August, are done. And we now begin the 3 months where we see the rapid acceleration of temperatures going down because before too long we're going to be talking snow. But right now, we're talking about the other extreme, and that is the fact that a bit of a break from the oppressive heat and humidity in the Northeast today, down into southeastern Pennsylvania and parts of south central Pennsylvania, which got clobbered with 6 to 9 inches of rain in some places. We had a cluster of thunderstorms just sit there. And that created some flash flooding all over again in an area that's gotten, some places have gotten 30 or more inches of rain during this month. And we also have what looks like the beginnings of what will be some very, very busy tropics. So we're going to get going front and center with the season's 6th tropical depression. And thank you to Tropical Tidbits for providing access to these satellite loops in very easy fashion. This is the depression now. Up until now, the Hurricane Center was referring to this as a potential tropical cyclone, but as we moved through the day, we certainly noticed, but based on the satellite loops, that this system was becoming better organized. We were seeing a core of thunderstorms that have developed in and around the circulation center. It's really beginning to take a look of a tropical storm, and I think you'll probably see this upgraded to a tropical storm tonight at some point. In fact, before we're done with this live stream, I'm going to check. They're still, I believe, putting out intermediate advisories because of the fact that there are tropical storm warnings up for the Cabo Verde Islands. And on the enhanced satellite, you can see that the convection's kind of balled up there with cloud tops cooling rather quickly. So we're going to monitor this, and again, I think it's going to become a tropical storm. Either they may upgrade it now, or they may wind up waiting at some point during the night or first thing tomorrow morning, but it will get there. And notice that there's more thunderstorm and wave action back in Africa that's moving westward, so it's going to probably mean another tropical wave will be moving out in short order. Here is the view, by the way. If you look at it from the standpoint of the satellite, the wide satellite picture, and let me get it's far enough, it's in the lower right there. You can make out the African coast when you see it on the visible, when the sun is up right there, and there's that large mass of clouds. One of the, up until now, something that the Hurricane Center talked about, when the wave moves offshore, there's what's referred to as a monsoon trough that's out in that part of the Atlantic. It basically helps to create some of the rainy conditions that occur there, and the system was sort of embedded inside this, and now it seems to have completely separated itself from it. So this is also one of the reasons why the Hurricane Center has made this now Tropical Depression 6, and again, it should probably be upgraded to Tropical Storm Florence before too long. So we're going to look at the 5 o'clock advisory from the Hurricane Center and their forecast. And first off, they actually keep it as a tropical storm right through the forecast period as it begins to move westward, and then maybe a little bit more of a northerly component late in the forecast period, which would be about Wednesday. It's at 13.8, 24.7 west, moving west at 15, top winds 35 miles an hour, and you can see during tonight they have it the S for tropical storm. They don't strengthen it to a hurricane. You know, one of the things that we were kind of considering looking at the models yesterday was the fact that the models, some of them, the GFS in particular, seemed to really wanted to go to the races with regards to intensifying this, and it kind of looked a little bit suspect. One of the things that we're going to have to watch is if this winds up strengthening below model consensus, a weaker system would more likely respond to the lower level steering, which would be a little more westerly. And some of the overnight models actually accomplished this by taking the system much further to the west, almost to 65 degrees west on one of the runs. But there's been a lot of crazy stuff going on with the GFS today with respect to this, and I'm going to get to that in just a second. It's clear that once it clears the Cabo Verde Islands, there is no threat to land here at all. So we're not, going to be worried about this. We're just going to march its way across. And for you, weather enthusiasts, as I said yesterday, this is a good way, as you get familiar with models and what's going on. This is good practice because you can see the puzzle pieces and how they come together. So we'll start with the new GFS, and I want to go to the upper air view so that we could take a look at the jet stream. And what is clear is this is tomorrow morning. You've got this flat east-west ridge that runs from off the African coast westward. And there, you can see it here as like this finger that just kind of points out westward with the tropical system to the south. So it has it sort of cradled. It's not the strongest upper high in the world, but it's enough. And then you have a bit of a weakness about halfway across the Atlantic, and then you have another upper high that's sitting off the east coast from Bermuda on westward into the Carolinas. And of course the stronger westerlies from the jet stream are coming out of the southwest across the Great Lakes into eastern Canada and then out into the Atlantic. There's a trough that runs from halfway between Iceland and Greenland southward, and then those westerlies continue on up toward northwestern Europe. Now the ridge that runs off, the narrow ridge off the African coast, is getting dented a bit by an upper low that is swinging in toward Portugal. So the ridge weakens, and then you've got another trough, another short wave that is going to be moving into the Atlantic south of Greenland by the middle part of next week, which creates another weakness in between. And here on the 108-hour GFS, which is for 2 a.m. next Wednesday, you have a ridge off the coast of Africa out into the Atlantic. You have the ridge inland of the east coast out into the Atlantic, and then that space right in the middle where we have the tropical system. So I will I'm going to go to the paint box here because this will make it a little easier to illustrate. And by the way, before I even put the map up, I do want to show you this is and I had this on the on the live stream as you were waiting. This was the image you saw. This is the European model for later next week, and the European is continuing to be the most bullish on tropical storm development over the next 10 days or so. And there are 3 distinct systems here. The one we are talking about now is the one that is furthest to the west, 2 others behind it. And what you can't see is the 2 periods before. The European does still try to spin up some kind of a low in the Gulf of Mexico, and we're going to look at that after we're done with this particular system. So you can see again, here it is. The one furthest to the east, those systems have yet to move off. The one that's furthest to the west is the one that we are looking at now, and you can't really see the system in the Gulf of Mexico. At this point, it's long gone. So it's this tropical wave that's in the Caribbean. Again, I'll get to that in a moment, but let me just let me get that upper air map for you here. So we'll paste it on. So this is the jet stream that I just showed you at 108 hours, which is next Tuesday night, 2 a.m. Wednesday morning. So here is, again, remember yesterday that analogy I gave about the gears turning and the old toddler toy with the gear puzzle, and you turn one gear, it would turn all the other gears. It's kind of what we see here in the upper atmosphere. The difference is that the gears are constantly changing in size and in magnitude and in position. They're moving around, and they affect all the other chess pieces on the board. So here is a rather strong shortwave that's moving off of Newfoundland. You've got the westerlies here across the Great Lakes, westerly winds in the upper atmosphere. You've got northwesterly winds from southeastern Canada, and then you've got west-southwest winds across the Atlantic ahead of that trough. The weakness extends down into the Atlantic pretty far to the south. Here's your upper ridge that's off the coast of Africa that extends out. We also, as I said, we have this trough that's near Portugal that's denting that ridge to some degree. And then you have the other upper high, and that's the one that is going to bring the heat and humidity back into the east for a good chunk of this coming week. That is sitting inland of the coast. So here you have what will probably be Tropical Storm Florence, or possibly even Hurricane Florence at this point, and it's going to try to respond to this weakness here that's in between the two ridges by attempting to move toward the north. And so let me just draw an arrow here. So it would try to go into this space here. And bear in mind, this is the GFS's perspective on this. You know, if one of the things that we were looking at yesterday was the idea of whether, you know, if these short waves are overdone, are they underdone? Is the ridge overdone or underdone on both sides of the Atlantic? Any small changes in position would create a rather different outcome. If, for example, let me just show you, just to illustrate. If, for example, say this upper high, and I'm going to draw the height line in black, but let's say this upper high was stronger and more like this, okay? And there was no trough denting the ridge, and that would at least, you know, give you this would probably push it further to the west. Or, for example, what if, here's another what if scenario, but say this upper ridge winds up, instead of being where it is a little bit further to the east and extends its arm further west. Well, that could then mean that, again, I'm just talking in theory here, that could mean a more west-northwest course and closer to the United States. Right now, the GFS and all the models are painting this idea of the weakness for the middle part of next week. So the models are fairly confident in the trough that it's presenting in the North Atlantic to be one of the catalysts to turn this thing northward. So now let's go a bit further here in our analysis and take a look at where this is all going. So there's that trough, and you see it kind of comes down, and it doesn't pick it up. It tries to, but it doesn't reach down far enough south, so it leaves it behind. And it's kind of sitting here in a no man's land. But as we move through the latter part of this week, you'll notice, by the way, and I'll back it up, watch the upper low that's east of Newfoundland, between Newfoundland and south of Greenland. That strengthens, and there's a short wave that comes down and around. That attempts to pick it up and kind of misses it. And there's actually another little short wave that finally takes it on north and northeastward and kicks it on out. And at this point, by the way, we are on September 13th. So we're talking almost 2 weeks from now. So this is the GFS's view on all of this. And as I said yesterday, I really, if I had to get, you know, if you're going to ask me, you know, what's going to happen with this, I would have to think that the odds certainly strongly favor it being a fish storm. You need to have, you're going to have to get some changes in what's going to be going on in eastern Canada with respect to subsequent troughs that are going to be moving there in order to have a different outcome. Here's the Europeans' view, and it's kind of the same thing. It's hard to find where it thinks the tropical system is, but we have it right here. The reflection of the tropical system is roughly at about 24.9 and 51.2. So it's barely at 50 degrees west. And you can see that the short waves that are moving across the northern jet from southeastern Canada across the Atlantic miss it at least out to 240 hours. So through day 10, it misses it, but there is a shortwave trough on the European that is approaching, that's moving out of the Great Lakes and into western New York. And I'll bring up the 10-day upper air here. And by the way, and in fact, I'm going to hold that thought. Let me do this first. Okay, so here is this is the European model, and this is at day 10 for its upper air. It's a little bit different than the GFS because if you remember from what we had, the GFS has a much stronger ridge here in the eastern part of the United States, whereas the European is saying no. There is we've got a shortwave trough here, right there, and this would be, now I'm guessing here that if I were to take this out another 24 hours, the tropical system, which is right here, would probably go up and out. Okay, you can see the way the European sees the ridge in the Atlantic. It sees it as much stronger over time than the GFS has. That may or may not be correct. So that's going to be one of the mysteries here. This is the upper high on the European. So it's a bit of a different look. The idea is the same. I think you would wind up with a faster recurvature on the European as opposed to the GFS, because the GFS is a bit more complex with what's going on up in the northern stream, but the end result would be the same. The strong ridge, by the way, is important because this one here out in the Atlantic, because it would be supportive for those additional tropical systems that are going to be moving out, those additional tropical waves that are going to be moving out off the African coast. So it's going to be important that we watch to see which model gains the upper hand when it comes to all this. And we'll go back to the Europeans' picture of everything here, and then let me see. I'll put we'll go to the normal anomaly. So this was one of the maps that I showed you before, and actually let me back it up. So here we are at Tuesday. Now look in the Gulf of Mexico, by the way. You see there's a kink there. All right, that is the reflection of the tropical wave that is now moving across the Dominican Republic, and I'll get to that in a second. But you see these two. Now you have two systems out in the Atlantic early next week, and then you've got three as you move along toward the end of next week and into next weekend. So I think all the models do give this signal that we're going to see a busier tropical period going forward. It would certainly make sense. We were at that time of year. It's been, we had two named storms in August, but they were way up in the North Atlantic. They were subtropical in nature, and we didn't really have anything come out of the major development region throughout much of late July and all of August. So it's really about time. The slightly cooler than average ocean water temperature will apparently is going to have some impact on how quickly these systems develop in their life cycle. The upper air winds certainly are supportive for tropical storm development and intensification, but the cooler than average water temperatures by about 1 degree Celsius would slow the intensification process down somewhat. Okay, now let's go to the next system, and this is the one that we have been watching the models just occasionally showing it, not showing it, showing it again. And on the satellite loop of this, I have the one centered over the Caribbean, so you can actually take a good look at this tropical wave. It's very disorganized. There's a large area of showers and thunderstorms. They seem to really blossom out during the daytime, and then they kind of weaken a bit at night. The clouds have a bit of an arcing to them, so there is a slight signature here, but it's definitely a signature of a tropical wave, and it's moving toward the west or west-northwest, and it will eventually find its way into the Caribbean. But for now, nothing's going to happen over the weekend with this. I'm sorry, let me just rephrase that. So this wave is going to continue to move west-northwestward and find its way into the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, this is not going to develop into anything through the weekend and into Monday. But as the wave moves westward, you're likely to see an increase in thunderstorm activity for Florida, the Bahamas and Florida, and for Cuba. In fact, not related to the wave, but with some disturbed weather in the Gulf of Mexico, you are seeing some thunderstorms actually flaring up in West Florida in response to some energy that's going on further to the west with a little bit of an inverted trough there. But I'll show you the European. Now the European's in 24-hour increments here, and there's your signature. That little bump there, the isobar in the Gulf of Mexico, is where there could be a little low there. That's a tropical wave or inverted trough, and then it does close off a very small low, moving it over New Orleans and eventually into southeast Texas. So it doesn't really do anything with this because of, I guess because of the fact that it's moving along, it's going to be moving along relatively quickly across the Gulf. It may not have much time. Perhaps the conditions, while they might be conducive, they may not be ideal. The wave from prior model runs was shown to try to start to develop when it was in the Bahamas. This doesn't appear to be this does not appear to be the case on these runs that we're seeing now. The European is of all the models has the best reflection of the system. The GFS, had it, didn't have it, had it, didn't have it. Now you can barely find it. So I'm not I'm not going to really get too concerned with this unless we suddenly start to see a real expansion of the amount of disturbed weather that's with the tropical wave. But I'm really not overly concerned about that. There's the GFS, by the way, for roughly the same time frame as the European. I mean, you can barely find it. There's a kink in the isobar in East Texas, and if we go back again, if you want to say that loop there in the isobar in the Gulf of Mexico Tuesday morning is the tropical wave, and I won't argue with you. That is probably what it is, but it doesn't really seem to want to to develop here. So I'm not too worried. It is going to produce some some hefty downpours and heavy rains. Now let's come back a bit to what's going on weather-wise in the eastern part of the United. Actually, you know what? Because we're going into the weekend too, I don't want to forget our friends out in the west. So let's take a look at the whole country, because in the west it's relatively quiet, other than the usual monsoon nonsense and some activity that's going on in the Rockies. But we've got this high that is sitting off east of Maine, and what's happening is that actually drier air from the northeast is bleeding southwestward. So I think for me, it's not, for my area, New Jersey, Long Island, southern New York, southern New England tomorrow, and southeastern New England, we may actually go to a mix of sun and clouds. I don't think we're going to have much in the way of rain to deal with. The next weather front there's a boundary zone here, a frontal zone lining up across the upper Midwest. So this is probably going to produce some severe weather overnight tonight and this morning, or at least some strong thunderstorms. And by the way, if you look up in the northwest in southwestern Canada, yeah, that is snow that's showing up there. So what eventually just happens is that we are going to see that warm tropical air come back into the east. There is what looks like a frontal boundary that runs from southeastern Canada across the Great Lakes, but it's weakening as it moves eastward, and the high offshore just kind of builds back westward, begins to sink southward as the ridge builds in the east, and you go back to the, I don't know if it'll be oppressive heat, but it is going to get hot, and it is going to get very humid again through the first 3 or 4, I would think at least into Thursday, because at this point, the next cold front, and we showed this to you yesterday, here's the next cold front by the middle of next week, and there was a run of the GFS that got rid of this completely, but now it's gone back to it for a couple of runs. I think that was just probably an overnight hiccup of some sort, but there's the next front on Wednesday, which is approaching the East Coast, and that will, at least the way it looks, would put an end to the heat and humidity sometime late Thursday when a cold front drops southward. It looks very similar to what we're seeing now. One of the things that the model has done is that it has backed off from yesterday, where it had this big push and this big monstrous 1040 plus high with dew points in the 20s and 30s in upstate New York next weekend. Well, some of that dry air is going to get in here, but you know what? This run would suggest that the frontal boundary is not going to get that far south, and the high is not going to be the big monster that that run indicated. And oh, look, snow shows up in Labrador. See these little sneak peeks now as we move into the month of September. So we could be sitting here a week from today going through the same thing we're going through now here in the east. Although maybe there might be more rain consequence from that through the northern mid-Atlantic and in the northeast. We'll see. But now, going into next weekend, it becomes more problematic with what the models were showing yesterday. So one of the keys through all of this is going to be the fact that, you know, which model is going to have the correct representation of what's going on with these upper troughs that are coming across Canada. They're weaker on some runs and stronger in others. I mean, I just show you the difference. Let me go back to the dew points from yesterday, and I will. By the way, look how bone dry it is in the west. But let me come closer here into the eastern part of the U.S. And all right, so we'll start off right now. At least it's cooler with the marine air, and actually getting some dew point relief tonight and Saturdays. We drop into the 50s, yippee. But then look, by Sunday, late Sunday afternoon and evening, the dew points are back up to 70 or better, and then we're dealing with 70 plus dew points during the day on Monday and Tuesday. Slightly less so on Wednesday, but a lot of dew points up in the 70s across the Great Lakes and in the Ohio Valley. And then Thursday, as the front approaches, one last day of 70-ish dew points. But there's the push today. Look at that. You barely get the dew points down into the upper 50s. Whereas if we go back, I'll just go back to yesterday's 18Z run. Look at the difference when we go toward next weekend. This was for next Saturday because of the fact that it had a much stronger push. And now we look at today's, not nearly as robust. The high is weaker. It's further north. I mean, you get a little bit of dew point relief, but it wouldn't be that much different from what we're seeing now. And then after that, it looks like we're going to get, if the GFS wants to start bringing fronts with a little more frequency. So that would probably set us up for a little bit more in the way of dew point humidity relief in the longer term. But we're going to be fighting this ridge in the east for a while. We're also going to be seeing what it does with all these tropical systems going forward. What's going to happen with those? So a lot of questions and a bit of mystery going forward. It'll be fascinating to watch this play out over the next couple of weeks to see what happens. And by the way, it could very well be that you could have all that tropical activity develop, and they could all wind up being fish storms. So let's just bear that in mind. There's nothing here that is going to be, nothing here that's even remotely suggests that there's any kind of problem in the next couple of weeks. So I'm not really until I see something that's really concrete and in front of me, where I can gain a little confidence with regards to my forecast. I'm not going to be too worried. But the pattern is always fun to watch, and we'll see how it evolves. Now, just really fast, I just want to let you guys know. So a couple of you have been asking me along the way if I'm on Patreon, and I am. So what I've done is I've set up, I have a page on Patreon. I am putting my website posts here, and I'm going to be they're going to be available only to Patreon members. They are completely ad-free. It's just the straight weather posts, so there's no no issues from that end. You'll get a very easy experience, and of course, as soon as I get my act together, as I'm trying to do, I will be cutting some exclusive content. So this is on my Patreon page, which is meteorologist Joe Cioffi. A link will come up on this video. A little icon will come up at some point, and you'll see it. If you want a link that way, I put a link up in the chat. You can also do it that way. And all I ask, is if you'd like to go this route, there are a couple of tiers that you can pick from. One's $2 a month, and then there's a couple that are higher. You can message me, talk to me. I'll be putting videos up there too. So anyway, if that's what, it's up there for those of you who have asked me about it. Take a look. So that's on Patreon, and it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and thank you very much. So now I'm going to come back to you folks here on the board, and we got some time tonight. It's coming up on 8 o'clock Eastern time. Oh, by the way, before I forget, let's just look at, I'm sorry, I almost forgot about this, but we looked at the radar, and here, I'm going to give it a quick refresh, and this is what's left of the really heavy rains that set up over southeastern Pennsylvania with flash flooding, and this is as of 8:01 p.m. So if you're watching this later tonight, remember, got to check your local National Weather Service office for any current watches and warnings, and you can get there by going to weather.gov. But this area produced some really vicious rainfall amounts here in parts of southeast and south central PA. Now we're getting some heavy rains, even extending down into northeastern Maryland. Down in the Gulf states, the areas from Tampa, St. Pete northward have some thunderstorms going on there, as well as across parts of southeast Georgia and through southern Mississippi and through the Gulf states. That's where all the tropical moisture is, by the way. Also, for Johnny Quest, looking at some showers and thunderstorms that are setting up back through southern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, but those look like they're moving more northeastward rather than eastward. So hopefully they'll continue that track. There's a couple of cells as you go right along a few small cells along the border of West Virginia and Virginia there. It's a kind of a narrow little east-west band, but that doesn't really appear to be too impressive. You've got the heavier storms that are back through Kentucky. Of course, Johnny Quest, for you, it just kind of rains if you just think about it. If the thought enters your mind, the next thing you know, you've got 3 inches of rain in your way. And as you pointed out, yeah, your normal September rainfall is about 3.5 inches. I wonder how many hours that once we get into the month of September, on tomorrow, September 1st, how many hours before you get that amount? Because it's just been incredible, the rainfall that's gone on there. Got some thunderstorm activity in parts of Missouri and in through Illinois. Also, you can see some into northeastern Illinois, in and around outside of Chicago, and then of course the monsoonal rains that are going on in parts of the Southwest, extending up into the northern Rockies. So that at least takes care of the weather that's going on currently. We just have a couple of small areas. The area in southeast PA with flash flooding, and then a couple of small areas in and around the Great Lakes. But otherwise, it looks like most of the country is really experiencing rather tranquil late summer conditions, relatively speaking. It's not crazy weather that is going on. William Huber, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat tonight. I very much appreciate it. Thank you. Just couldn't run back to the beginning of the chat. I know you said that you're fishing tomorrow and you hope fluke season is short now and coming tide all morning at Moriches. You know, I really would love to be able to get out tomorrow, but my buddy Phil is busy, so he's my boat hook in a manner of speaking. And he's also my good friend. Make no mistake. And I may do, maybe I'll wait till tomorrow evening and maybe do a little bit of largemouth bass fishing near me, because the water is so warm in the local lakes and ponds, and you can't really do it during the daytime, but at least it'll be cloudy tomorrow and relatively reasonable. 3.55 is your number, Johnny Quest. Let me know how long it takes before you hit it. Eric H., is Houston going to get slammed by the disturbance? I wouldn't use the word slammed, but that moisture eventually could find its way across the Gulf and into Texas. So I imagine you will get some downpours and thunderstorms out of it, but let's wait over the weekend. We'll evaluate where we're going with that. I can tell you, by the way, if we, I'll bring up, I got it in here somewhere. There it is. I have them all hiding under my picture, but I do have the Weather Prediction Center's 7-day outlook, and you know, they do a pretty good job. I have to give them credit here. They do show some 5-inch rain amounts along coastal Texas and Louisiana. This is all part of the tropical wave, by the way. So that is its reflection as it moves westward. So we get several inches or more of rain across much of Florida, especially along the east-facing shore and the west-facing shore, and then extending that westward across the Gulf. And also notice big rains across the upper Mississippi Valley, back through from the Central Plains, upper Mississippi Valley into the western lakes, because of the persistent frontal boundary setting up in that area with the big ridge in the east where it is. That's where you get the boundary between the ridge and the westerlies from Canada, and that's where things get rather noisy when it comes to thunderstorms, and particularly when you have a ton of tropical air and you're talking about some hefty rainfalls. Let's see, Reaver 501, any news on when Joe Cioffi's winter forecast gets issued? Reaver, I've said this before, and I've said this again. I don't do winter forecasts. I don't do long-range forecasts because I have a really difficult time getting my head around it. There's just too much stuff to look at, and a lot of it's very technical. And you know, quite frankly, I'm much more excited about what goes on in the short range inside 2 weeks. I'll let the long-range people figure out. Let them do that. But I'm not. I don't do it. We will look at things along the way. We'll look at snow cover across Canada. We'll look at Siberian snow cover, because everybody's going to ask, and why not? Certainly we could look at that. We'll take a look at what kind of blocking signals we'll be getting. But in terms of a specific forecast, I'm not going to be able to give it to you. The only thing I'll tell you ahead of time, Reaver, is in terms of snowfall, at least, we were due for a subpar year. You know, 7 out of the last 8 winters have produced above normal snowfalls up in my neck of the woods anyway. That's not, I'm talking specifically for where I live, and not necessarily covering the whole area, but as a whole, snowfalls have been running above normal even in the warmer winters that we've had. So at some point, you know, a subpar winter is going to happen. Is it this year? Is it next year? I don't know. But, you know, this sort of automatic reflex now to think that every winter is going to be gangbusters is the exact opposite of what it was when I grew up in the 70s and also in my young adult years in the 80s and 90s. Snow was snowstorms were very infrequent, and in some cases, some years, hardly any at all. So just bear that in mind. It's been a bonanza for the most part since the year 2000. Tyler Knepp, 283, Route 283 is shut down. I assume you're talking about down in PA. Mystery Gamer, you're from York, so you know with all the rain that's been going on, and parts of Route 30 closed as well. Been crazy today. Mystery Gamer, 10.57 inches of rain. You got a river in your front yard. You made a video. Post the video and get it over to me. Okay, if you're okay with that, I'd love to show it. Nearly a foot where Tyler Knepp is. It was incredible. It just this cluster, and the models did not do a good job with this, by the way. This cluster of storms just formed and just sat there. There was some of the short range models were starting to show this last night, but the extent of it, you can't really expect models to forecast the extremes. It really just got totally out of hand with regards to that. No surprise that Long Island River, that the sun was out early in the afternoon. That's that dry air from New England pushing southwestward. And yes, at Harrisburg, hardly any rain. That's just how it happened. That that area just kind of sat in one particular spot, and that was it. Anthony Orr, thanks for reminding me. I wanted to check. They still keep it as a tropical depression. 1,004 pressure. Well, that's because they had 1,005 pressure reported on the southern part of the Cabo Verde Islands, so they had to go a little bit lower. But they're probably going to wait for the 11 o'clock package to upgrade it, or certainly I would guess by 5 a.m., unless the satellite suddenly shows deterioration. Reaver, a reminder, Hurricane Carol. You guys are very good about reminding me of all these anniversaries. Hurricane Carol on this date in 1954 on Long Island is a Cat 3. 70 people lost their lives. Today's dollars, it would be $25 billion. No, I was not born in 1954. I was born in 1959. Okay, so I came 1 year before Hurricane Donna in 1960. Partick McGill. Okay. My grandson is doing very well. Thank you so much for asking. He's 3.5 months old. And he's just a scream. He's terrific. He smiles a lot. He's a very, very happy baby, and he's growing by leaps and bounds. And I appreciate you asking. 4DBZ Maddox, it's going to rain. It's going Rainmaker. Who's going Rainmaker? Not me. Let's see. Iron Mine. First day of fall, September 22nd. Daylight hours are getting shorter. Non-smiley face. I get it. I can understand that. There is a it's not that I actually enjoy the summertime like anybody else. I just wish that the atrocious humidity that we had, that was just too much to handle, and for too long. I mean, it's been so unrelenting here since the middle part of July. We had some nice air masses come down in July with a few days of dew points down in the 40s. Those were nice treats, and those breaks could have certainly been used in between these hot and humid air masses. It would have been nice to see them come down now in August, but not until we can get that ridge in the east out of the way. Let's see. Sea surface temperatures have cooled. I love when people breathe. I'm not just trying to you put a smile to my face. A lot of people do this. I've heard, they'll use the phrase, I've heard the sea surface temperatures. I can just visualize people sitting around, in these like little clutch fests and gossip mills, and they just sort of, well, I hear that the water temperatures in the Pacific have dropped, and that the Atlantic water temperatures are below average or above average or whatever it is. It just gives me a very, very funny image. I haven't looked at what the water temperatures look like out in the Pacific, but you've just given me something to do at some point. Who do we have, J.S. Sweetie? Who do we have to pay for cooler weather? I wish you could do it for me. I wish you could pay me and I could deliver, but not the case. Delvin 4519, good to see you as always. Live stream scheduled this weekend. I finally figured out what was the technical reason why I couldn't load the Joe and Joe show up. I finally was able to load it up last night after I dealt with the issue. So I think we're going to do a Joe and Joe show tonight. Sometimes on Friday nights, both of us are tired. I haven't spoken to him tonight, so I'm okay with doing it. But if he decides he wants to skip it, we may skip it. But I'll tell you, if it does happen, I'll load it up to the YouTube library, and you can watch it later tonight. Or, of course, you can watch it on Facebook, usually at about 9:15. As far as my weekend schedule of broadcasting is concerned, I'm not going to tie myself down to any time right now because I've worked 12 days in a row, and I need a break. So I will, at some point tomorrow or Sunday, I will do a video, or perhaps I will do one each day. But I'm not going to make that decision now. But I will schedule it so that at least you'll know when it's coming. Johnny Quest, be nice if we could stay on either daylight savings time year round or standard time. Standard time. I want to be on standard time year round. I don't want to be on daylight saving time at all. Let's go back to standard time because this way, when I go to bed at night, when I get home from work at my house at 11:30, virtually most of the new GFS would be out. This is great in the winter time when I want to get a heads up on the next storm system. And when it's on, when we're on saving time, it is a pain because everything's an hour later. In the wintertime, if I'm really inspired and there's a storm threatening, I'll even wait up for the European, which starts at 1 a.m. So if I get to bed, if I get to bed at 1:30 or 1:45 a.m., I'm okay with it. But if when it's on saving time, then I'm not staying up till 2:45. Scott Briller, yeah, thank you so much. Your super chat did go through. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. I'll be able to get a cigar on my way home, so that's a good thing for me. So let's vote for standard time year round. So all right, so we're at 46 minutes into this video. I know Delvin would like me to go like hours, but I've kind of run out of weather right now. So we're gonna stop at this point and leave it at that. So let me just remind everybody once again, in case you're on late, just want to give you a couple of options. You can, if you'd like, you can use Patreon as a way of supporting my channel. I have posts on Patreon. They are ad-free, and there will be some additional original content. There will be some content coming that will be specific only to Patreon patrons. This is a way for an easy way for you to support my YouTube channel, websites, and everything else. And I am going to also be coming out with an app soon. So this, it helps me. This comes out of my own pocket, so this helps me, pay my bills. And I really appreciate those of you who have done it through Super Chat. This is just another easy way for you to do it. If you will go to Patreon, and I've put the link up there for you. And thank you very much. And you know what? Please, no one's under any obligation to do any of this stuff. I just put it out there. If you'd like to, that's great. And the other way you could do it is if you shop on Amazon. You can use the Amazon link that's on the descriptor to this video. That would be most appreciated as well, because Amazon then throws me back a little bit of coin from whatever you purchase. It doesn't come out of your pocket, it comes out of theirs. And it's a great way for my channel to earn a little bit of extra cash. And also, you can use eBay, so you can get cash back on any of the major retailers that you buy. That link is also on the descriptor. I'm an affiliate member of the... I'm a participant in the Ebates and in the Amazon affiliate advertising programs, which are designed to provide a means for this channel to earn fees from both Ebates and Amazon. Thank you so much for being here. Watch for the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which will be coming up probably at about 9:15, assuming that he wants to do one tonight. And if you can't be on there, I'll have it on Patreon. We'll put the show on Patreon, and also I'll upload it to YouTube at some point later on tonight. Thank you again for William Huber, and thank you again, Scott Briller, for hitting Super Chat tonight. Everybody have a great weekend. We will see you either tomorrow or Sunday or both. Or I'll do one or two of them.